How do you know you're not dreaming right now? You may have clicked on this video for the purpose of falling asleep. But what if you already are? Not in the obvious cinematic way, no fog, no floating, no surreal soundtrack, just this, your room, your breath, your quiet curiosity. Everything seems normal, but sometimes that's the trick. Dreams rarely feel like dreams while you're in them. That's the unsettling part. They imitate real life so well that you don't question the logic until you wake up. And then you say, of course it was a dream. As if clarity always arrives on the other side of consciousness. But what if it doesn't? What if the difference between dreaming and waking isn't something you can feel, only something you assume? That idea isn't new. Philosophers have whispered it for centuries. Descartes tried to doubt everything just to find something solid beneath it all. Zhuangzi dreamt he was a butterfly and woke unsure of which was more real. And today, neuroscientists are still trying to map the mind's layers, only to find that the borders between sleeping and waking are blurry at best. This isn't a warning. There's no need to panic. You're not trapped in some infinite dream loop. Or maybe you are, and it's just particularly well scripted. Either way, you're here, and your mind is working. That's a good place to start. So we're not going to yank the curtain back. We're going to sit with the curtain, maybe trace its folds, maybe wonder what's behind it, and whether it matters. Because whether this is a dream or a beautifully stable hallucination called reality, it's happening. And the question, how do you know you're not dreaming right now, isn't meant to shake you awake. It's meant to help you, rest, inside the question itself. You don't have to be asleep for life to start acting weird. You've had those moments, haven't you? When the world tilts slightly sideways, not enough to fall, just enough to wonder. A word repeated until it sounds fake. A stranger who seems too familiar. A task you've done 1,000 times that suddenly feels like you're doing it for the first time. These are not dreams, they're Tuesdays. But they feel like dreams, and that's the strange part. Real life at times runs on its own dream logic. Coincidences stack, time hiccups, conversations repeat, memory edits itself without permission. And through it all, we keep marching forward like everything is perfectly in order. Dreams don't follow rules, they follow rhythms. They borrow from memory, remix ideas, warp physics, and ignore causality. Not because they're chaotic, but because they don't need to justify themselves. Sound familiar? Waking life has rules, yes, but they're rules we learn, not rules we necessarily feel. Gravity pulls you down, time moves forward. People don't suddenly morph into your high school math teacher wearing a pelican mask. That's what we tell ourselves. But then, déjà vu, or a moment where you forget what day it is, or the strange, shared silence between two people on a subway car. Neither speaking, both deeply present. It's hard to say why that feels dreamlike, but it does. It's not the strangeness of dreams we recognize. It's the quiet absurdity that creeps into everyday life. The philosopher David Hume once suggested that cause and effect aren't something we can ever truly observe, only infer. You see A, then B, and you call that a pattern. But what if it's just habit? What if your sense of reality is just a well-rehearsed loop? Dreams don't argue. They don't explain. They just continue until they don't. And some days, life feels the same. So maybe it's not the content of dreams that makes them different from waking life. Maybe it's the level of trust we place in them. And that's worth looking at slowly, gently, before the next scene fades in. There's a name for the rare and slippery moment when you become aware, mid-dream, that you're dreaming. It's called lucid dreaming. And for a brief window, often seconds, sometimes minutes, you get to tiptoe between worlds. Dream logic still applies, but suddenly, so does intention. You can fly, change the weather, walk through walls, or if you're especially rational, you might try to ask the dream itself a question. And here's where it gets interesting. Even in a lucid dream, many people report a strange feeling of doubt. They know they're dreaming, but they also don't entirely believe it. Something in the background hums, whispering that this might be real after all. That tension, that little tug of war between knowing and not quite knowing, is the exact territory philosophy lives in. Descartes built his whole philosophical method around it. If our senses can deceive us in dreams, how do we ever know when we're not being deceived? His solution was to start from the only thing he couldn't doubt, the fact that he was thinking. I think, therefore I am. Not I see, or I walk, or I pay taxes. Just the awareness of thought. But even that gets fuzzy, because if you've ever had a dream where you were sure you were thinking clearly, only to wake up and realize you just spent 40 minutes trying to build a sandwich out of clouds and tax codes, then maybe thinking isn't the anchor we hoped it was. Lucid uncertainty is a quieter, more poetic kind of doubt. It's not frantic. It doesn't demand answers. It just opens a window and lets the breeze in. The breeze of possibility. That maybe there's more to reality than whatever we're labeling as real in this moment. So whether you're asleep, awake, or floating somewhere in the in-between, here's the question worth holding gently. What part of you is deciding what counts as real? And how confident is it? Really? If you've ever tried to test reality, really test it, you know how oddly slippery it can be. Try this. Look at your hands. Do they look normal? Now look away. Look back. Still the same. That's one of the classic lucid dream checks. In dreams, things don't always stay consistent. Hands morph. Text shifts. Light flickers in unnatural ways. But here's the catch. Even when you're dreaming, these tests can fail. Your mind, clever as it is, can conjure hands that stay hands, clocks that keep ticking, and mirrors that reflect what they should. Dream logic isn't just illogical, it's adaptive. It adapts to what you expect reality to do. And waking life, it's not much different. There's something unnerving about how little we verify. You don't recheck the laws of gravity every morning. You don't knock on walls to make sure they're solid. You just trust that the world will behave until it doesn't. And even then, your first instinct is usually to blame yourself. I must be tired. That was weird. Maybe I imagined it. But what if you didn't? Philosopher Thomas Metzinger once argued that the self is a kind of controlled hallucination, a model your brain creates to help navigate reality. It works so well, we rarely notice it's a model. But like all models, it has limits. And sometimes those limits blur the boundary between the world as it is and the world as it seems. We tend to think of waking life as a default, the normal setting. But if dreams can simulate sensory input, memory, time, and even reasoning. What exactly guarantees that this moment is different? You can try to test reality. Rub your fingers together. Read a line of text twice. Pinch yourself if you must. But remember, passing those tests doesn't prove you're awake. It just proves your dream is unusually convincing. And that's fine. Because the point isn't to panic. The point is to pause. To notice how much of our certainty comes not from evidence, but from habit, from familiarity, from the comfort of things feeling real, even if they might not be. Reality feels stable. Tables stay where you left them. Street lights glow in familiar patterns. The sun, without fail, shows up every morning, even if you sometimes forget to notice. This sense of consistency is one of the mind's favorite tricks. It gives the impression that the world is out there, solid and predictable, independent of your perception. But let's pull on that thread a little. Every night, your brain creates a vivid world out of nothing. No light, no sound, no external input. Just raw imagination, dressed up as experience. And yet, it feels coherent. Time moves, emotions swell, spaces open and close. You believe it fully, until you don't. Now here's the unsettling part. Waking life may operate on the same scaffolding. Your eyes don't capture the world like a camera. They take in fractured signals, flashes of light, incomplete information. Your brain assembles it all into a smooth picture. It fills in gaps. It edits the past. It even guesses the future a few milliseconds ahead, just to keep things looking stable. In neuroscience, this is called predictive coding. Your mind isn't passively observing reality. It's constantly predicting it, then adjusting quietly when it's wrong. What you experience is less like a photograph, more like a very convincing guess. And most of the time, that guess is good enough. But once in a while, you notice a glitch, a word that doesn't sound like a word, a face you recognize but can't place. The sudden sensation that the floor beneath your feet is a little too consistent, like a set piece from a play. That's the stability illusion cracking. The world may not be a dream, but it is being constructed in real time, not by some external architect, but by your own mind. And if your brain can create stability from chaos while you're awake, it certainly can do it while you're asleep. So the next time everything feels normal, just pause, gently, and remember that normalcy is the most elaborate illusion of all. There's something curious about the idea of waking up. We usually think of it as a shift in state, from sleeping to alert, from foggy to focused. But what if it's not just about eyelids and alarm clocks? What if waking up can happen inside a thought? Consider this. You're mid-sentence, explaining something you've explained 100 times before. A belief, a habit, a worldview. And suddenly, a flicker. A moment where you catch yourself mid-thought and ask, wait, do I even believe this anymore? That's not a dream ending, that's a thought ending. Or more accurately, it's one thought waking up inside another. It's easy to assume our beliefs are permanent, solid structures we carry through life like stones in a backpack. But they're more like clouds. They drift, shift, and sometimes disappear before we even notice. And every now and then, a lightning bolt of awareness cuts through. Philosopher Daniel Dennett calls some thoughts memes, not in the internet sense, but as self-replicating idea units that live in the mind and jump from one person to another. Many of these memes feel like yours, but they didn't start with you. They're borrowed, absorbed, inherited. Culture, family, school, advertising. They all pour ideas into you until you can't quite remember where you end and they begin. To wake up inside a thought, then, is to realize you've been thinking on autopilot. And that realization, that metacognition, the awareness of your awareness, is rare. Not because we're incapable of it, but because we're too busy to notice, too practiced in rehearsing the same mental loops. But when it does happen, when you spot the machinery, it's a moment of quiet liberation. Not dramatic, just lighter, like slipping out of a coat you didn't know you were wearing. It's not that all your thoughts are unoriginal, it's that many are unexamined, and that's okay. But now and then, when you do wake up inside one, pause, feel it, float there for a moment, because that might be the closest thing to real clarity you'll ever feel. Have you ever told someone about a dream, only to realize halfway through that you're not entirely sure it was a dream? A staircase in the wrong building, a friend you haven't seen in years holding a conversation you swear already happened. That peculiar déjà vu when the world feels familiar, but not in the way it should. Memory and dreaming are neighbors in the brain. In fact, they might share more than a property line. They might share a blueprint. During REM sleep, your brain activates many of the same regions used in waking memory. Except, it's not just playing back old footage, it's remixing. It's cutting scenes, adding soundtracks, inventing dialogue. And sometimes, it forgets to label the final product as dream instead of memory. The result? A weird little artifact in your head that feels as real as any Tuesday. Cognitive scientists call this a source monitoring error. It's when your brain remembers the content of something, but not its origin. Was it a dream, a book, a conversation you imagined having but never did? And let's be honest, most of the time, we don't care where it came from. If it feels real, we treat it as real. Until someone looks at us sideways and says, "That never happened." Oops. But if your brain can mistake a dream for a memory, how many of your memories are actually just very convincing dreams, or fragments of stories patched together from emotion, pattern, and repetition? The line between dream and memory isn't sharp, it's fuzzy, and the more you explore it, the more you realize just how much of your identity is built on feelings you've decided to trust. Maybe that's why some memories feel sacred, not because they're accurate, but because they're yours, even if they're wrong. So the next time you recall something vivid, something strange, something oddly comforting or eerie, ask yourself, did I live that? Or did I dream it so well that it doesn't matter anymore? There's a peculiar moment just after you wake when the world feels a little wrong. Your room looks the same. The light falls just as it always does, but something feels off, as if your body has arrived, but your mind is still searching for the exit door of a different reality. And in that moment, you might wonder, was that dream more real than this? It's not a silly question. Dreams, especially vivid ones, don't always feel fake. In fact, some can feel painfully, astonishingly real, more emotional, more intense, more true than anything your alarm clock could offer. Why? Because reality doesn't always feel real. It feels repetitive, familiar, dull even. Dreams, especially lucid ones, feel urgent, raw. They compress meaning. You're not just talking to someone. You're reconciling a decade of emotion in a single glance. You're not just running. You're escaping something that doesn't have a name, but you know it matters. Neurologically speaking, dreams often activate the same brain regions responsible for perception, memory, and emotion. But they do it without the logical filters that waking life imposes. No traffic signals, no bank statements, just pure cognition, unfiltered and sometimes absurd, but powerful. So if a dream can feel more real than reality, then what exactly makes reality real? Is it consistency, pain, continuity, consensus? Because if you wake from a dream in tears, if you carry its emotional residue for days, if you can remember the sound of a voice that never existed, then it's not just a dream. It's a mental event with real weight. And maybe, just maybe, our mistake is assuming that emotional impact equals falsehood. That because it wasn't physical, it wasn't true. But your brain doesn't make that distinction. It encodes what feels important. Whether it came from the outside world or from inside your sleeping head is sometimes just a technicality. So if you've ever woken up missing someone who never existed, you're not broken. You just got a glimpse of how rich the mind can be, even when the world thinks you're off the clock. In the real world, apples fall down. In dreams they float, then explode, then turn into your Uncle Steve. And somehow it all makes perfect sense. Until you wake up. Dreams don't follow physics. They follow associations. One image triggers another. Emotions bend space. A hallway becomes a beach, becomes a childhood bedroom, and your brain doesn't blink. This isn't just fantasy. It's a different system of logic, one that doesn't require cause and effect to play nicely. One where objects morph, not because they should, but because your mind allows them to. What's curious is how often our waking life feels just as strange, but we insist on explaining it. Think of the moments you've misremembered a face, walked into a room and forgotten why, or thought you heard someone call your name in an empty space. These aren't just glitches. They're signs that your brain is interpreting data in a way that feels right, even if it's objectively off. And now, imagine that same brain, without rules, without gravity, without a shared world to anchor it, doing its thing in sleep. Welcome to dream logic. But here's the twist. Some physicists have proposed that the universe itself might behave more like a probability field than a machine. That at the quantum level, cause and effect are murky. Things happen, but the why is fuzzy. Sound familiar? Dreams aren't chaotic. They're just ruled by different constraints, internal ones, emotional gravity instead of literal, narrative necessity instead of physical laws. And maybe, just maybe, that tells us something about the mind. Because if your brain can build a world in which fish can fly, time loops backward, and your third-grade teacher has a lion's mane, and still make it feel plausible, then how different is that really from your waking self making sense of an infinitely complex universe? Maybe the physics of dreams isn't nonsense. Maybe it's just you, without the manual. There's a strange kind of magic in the moment you realize you're dreaming. Not after you wake up, during, that flicker of awareness, that quiet click when your brain whispers, "This isn't real," and for once you listen. It's called lucid dreaming, and for those who've experienced it, the sensation is unforgettable. You're in the dream, but you're also slightly outside it, like peeking behind the curtain while still standing on stage. Some people fly, others rewrite the laws of physics. A few just sit there, marveling at the folds of their own invented world. And all of them share one thing: the sense that awareness, not environment, defines reality. Which raises the question, what if waking life works the same way? Lucidity isn't about escaping the dream. It's about recognizing it, seeing it for what it is, an experience constructed in real time by your brain, your emotions, your memories. And that awareness grants you choice, not full control perhaps, but agency, a say in how you respond, where you look, what you question. Now apply that to your day-to-day. You wake up, brush your teeth, scroll through notifications, walk into rooms, answer questions, nod at people. How much of it do you notice? How much of your waking life is simply a well-rehearsed script? Lucidity in life is rare, but it happens. Sometimes when tragedy strikes, sometimes in moments of awe, and sometimes, unexpectedly, when nothing much is going on at all. Just a pause, a breath, and a sudden awareness that you are here. Some traditions call this mindfulness. Some call it enlightenment. We'll just call it showing up. Because maybe you don't need to fly or bend spoons to be lucid. Maybe you just need to stop long enough to ask, is this real? And then listen carefully, not for the answer, but for the echo that comes after. That space between question and certainty, that's where lucidity lives. Let's say just for a moment that you are dreaming. How would you know? One common answer is other people. You look around and things seem consistent. No one's floating. The furniture isn't melting. Your barista doesn't have 3 arms and an existential crisis about espresso. So, must be real, right? But here's where it gets tricky. We rely on social consensus to validate our sense of reality. If everyone agrees that the light is red, the coffee is hot, and the meeting starts at 10, then that's reality. Or at least, close enough. But consensus is not infallible. History is full of societies that agreed on terrible things. People once agreed the earth stood still, that leeches cured disease, that women shouldn't vote. Agreement doesn't equal truth. It equals comfort. In dreams, the crowd often plays along. You ask a dream character what time it is, and they might respond, Thursday is wearing a blue hat. Nonsense, but delivered with confidence. The illusion of consensus. Waking life, too, is filled with confident nonsense. Office jargon, political slogans, comment sections. Things that sound reasonable because others nod along. But if you stop and actually look, really listen, you might hear the same kind of fuzzy dream logic wrapped in suits and Wi-Fi. We treat other people's behavior as anchors. If they're calm, it must be fine. If they're panicking, maybe we should too. But what if everyone's just following cues from each other? It's turtles all the way down. Consensus helps us build shared models of the world. It's useful, necessary even. But it's not reality itself. It's a map. And sometimes, the map is printed upside down. So the next time you find yourself reassured because everyone else seems fine, Pause for a moment. Take a breath. Ask whether you're in agreement or just in sync. Because in dreams, the crowd often agrees. Right up until you wake up and realize none of them were real. And in life, well, maybe reality isn't what they say it is. Maybe it's what you notice when you stop pretending it's obvious. We like to think that seeing is believing. Touch it, smell it, hear it. If your senses confirm it, then it must be real. Case closed. End of story. But your senses are not direct lines to truth. They're interpreters, middlemen, filters, and sometimes fabulists. Your brain doesn't receive the world raw. It receives data, frequencies, photons, vibrations, and assembles that data into a story that feels solid. And it does this in real time, with speed and flair and more than a little improvisation. Let's take sight. You're not seeing the present moment. You're seeing the past. A fraction of a second, delayed, interpreted, color-corrected, and filled in around the edges where your eyes never bothered to look. Your ears, also storytellers, they fill gaps, adjust volume, tweak pitch, and if your brain decides a certain sound is irrelevant, like your own breathing or the hum of a refrigerator, it'll just mute it. Touch, same deal. Your skin doesn't report a full texture map every second. It gives highlights, alerts, something's too hot, something's too cold. The rest, smoothed over. And smell, well, smell is memory's favorite magic trick. A puff of jasmine or diesel or fresh bread can teleport you across decades without asking permission. So what's the point? If you're dreaming, your brain generates these sensations without any external input. And is shockingly good at it. So good that your body might flinch when dream you stubs a toe. Your heart rate might spike when dream you is chased. Pain, pleasure, color, light, fabricated, but convincing. And if it can do that while you sleep, what's stopping it from doing the same during the day? With just enough external data to fake a seamless narrative. Reality, as you experience it, is not what is. It's what your brain builds and what your senses agree to pretend is stable. In that sense, your life isn't just happening to you. It's being rendered like a game engine, fast, adaptive, and, occasionally, full of glitches, which raises a quiet, thrilling possibility. What if the only real thing is awareness itself? There's a threshold, a soft, slippery one, between sleep and wakefulness. It's that place where dreams dissolve, but haven't quite let go. You're half awake, half somewhere else. You know your name, but your hands still feel like someone else's idea. The room looks familiar, but the light feels too still. Reality is returning, but not confidently. And sometimes it doesn't return all at once. This boundary has a name, hypnopompia. It's the fading stage of sleep, when your brain is turning the lights back on, but the shadows haven't left the room. Hallucinations can happen here. So can clarity or confusion. It's where inspiration lives, and sometimes a little dread. But it's not just a biological phase. It's a metaphor for something deeper, because life is full of moments like this, when the edges of perception blur, and the lines between real and imagined get soft. Ever have a dream that you think you woke from, only to find yourself still in the dream? That moment of double waking, unsettling, isn't it? Now ask yourself, how do you know that this waking is the last one? We assume that reality is a solid floor, but what if it's more like a series of trapdoors, each one opening onto a slightly more convincing illusion? You don't need psychedelics or sci-fi for this idea, just memory. Think back to a moment where you were completely convinced of something, a fact, a relationship, a feeling, and then, one day, you weren't. The certainty vanished, the belief dissolved, the dream popped. That's waking up too. Which means the fragile line between waking and dreaming isn't just a sleep cycle. It's a lifelong phenomenon. A rhythm, a wobble, a question we step over daily. Are we fully awake? Or just more aware than we were yesterday? That's the real threshold. Not a border, but a gradient. A spectrum of consciousness sliding from fog to focus and back again. So the next time the world feels a bit off, don't panic. You might not be broken. You might just be standing on the seam between two layers of mind. We often treat dreaming as a lower state of consciousness, a sort of mind mush, a place where logic takes a nap and nonsense takes the wheel. But the truth is, dreaming requires immense intelligence. The sleeping brain isn't passive. It's constructing worlds, fully immersive ones, in real time. It's composing sounds, designing spaces, scripting dialogue, evoking emotions, and weaving entire narratives out of scattered memory and raw feeling. And it does all this with no director, no script, no budget, and no sense of time. You know what that sounds like? Creativity. Some neuroscientists suggest that dreaming is the brain's sandbox, a simulation chamber, a place to test emotional reactions, model potential futures, and dissolve the boundaries that waking thought often imposes. It's not chaos, it's free-form cognition. Now flip the lens. What if waking life is the constrained version? Think about it. In your daily routine, how many of your thoughts are original? How many ideas do you pursue freely? How often do you let one notion bleed into another without rushing to categorize, justify, or delete it? Waking life is structured. Tasks, goals, deadlines, but dreaming is the place where your brain dares to think sideways, to ask questions without worrying if they're useful, to feel something without demanding a reason. That isn't stupid. That's a kind of wisdom we often overlook. There's a theory, not fringe, but growing, that the brain in REM sleep might be accessing the same creative mechanisms we use when problem solving, storytelling, or engaging in deep intuition. And if that's true, then the division between waking and dreaming minds is more a matter of form than function. Both states think, both feel, both explore meaning. One is just better at pretending it isn't dreaming. So the next time you dismiss a dream as nonsense, consider this. Your brain might have just written a play, scored the soundtrack, and run a full-body VR experience, while your conscious self snored. That's not regression. That's genius on autopilot. And maybe waking life would be a little brighter if we gave that dreamer a say. Your brain loves patterns. It finds faces in clouds, melodies in noise, meaning in coincidences. It stitches dots together with almost desperate enthusiasm, turning randomness into rhythm and accidents into stories. We call this pattern recognition, And to be fair, it's a superpower. It's why we can read, drive, speak, paint, play chess, spot danger, and predict rain without checking the weather. But here's the twist. Recognition often slides into projection. That is, we don't just see patterns. We project them onto the world, sometimes where none exist, sometimes because we're bored, sometimes because we need things to make sense, even when they don't. Dreams are built on this logic. A duck turns into your ex. Fine. The moon is inside your closet. Sure. You don't question the transitions. You explain them on the fly. You create coherence where there is none. And you do it while sleeping. Now consider waking life. How often do you jump to conclusions? Finish someone's sentence in your head. See a look on someone's face and spin an entire emotional narrative around it. You're not just reading the world, you're writing it too. This tendency isn't a flaw, it's survival. The ability to predict patterns helps us move through life with a sense of continuity and control. But it also creates illusions, false positives, misplaced certainty, phantom connections that only you see. Have you ever had that moment where you thought someone said your name in a crowded room? Or felt like a song on the radio was answering your thoughts? That's the dream logic engine still running under the hood. The question isn't whether you see patterns, it's whether you own up to the fact that some of them might be yours. In this way, waking life shares more with dreams than we'd like to admit. Both are spaces where the mind maps meaning onto mystery. Both can lead us toward insight or into rabbit holes. And both depend on one fragile thing: belief. So next time you see a sign, a symbol, a message that feels too perfect, pause. Maybe it's real, or maybe it's your dream logic doing cartwheels in daylight. Either way, it's your pattern now. We live inside invisible laws, not just gravity, thermodynamics, or cause and effect, but deeper ones, the kind that tell you what a day is, or what counts as real, or why a coffee cup can't suddenly turn into a swan and fly away mid-sip. But here's the trouble. You've never actually seen those laws written down. You've only experienced them consistently enough to believe they're universal. Things fall, fire burns, time flows in one direction. People don't teleport. That's the script, and you followed it your whole life. Dreams don't. In dreams, those laws evaporate. They rewrite themselves with confidence. Objects morph. Time loops. People blend together like watercolor. And yet, inside the dream, it often feels totally fine. The logic changes, but you adapt. You don't wake up screaming, "That building had too many staircases." You wake up wondering why it felt so normal. Now look around. In waking life, when something breaks the expected pattern, a glitch in the software, a moment of eerie coincidence, a déjà vu too crisp to ignore, what do? We shrug. Weird. Then we move on. But what if those little rips in the fabric are hints? Not that we're literally dreaming, but that our grip on what's real might be softer than we admit. There's a theory in neuroscience called predictive processing. It suggests that your brain doesn't passively record reality. Instead, it predicts what will happen next and updates that prediction if the world doesn't cooperate. Which means reality, as you experience it, might just be your brain's best guess. The rules feel stable, but they're actually flexible, interpretive. probabilistic, and most of the time, that works just fine. Until, of course, something doesn't quite fit, and your mind wobbles. Not because reality broke, but because you caught a rare glimpse of the scaffolding behind it. And just for a moment you wondered, what else might be adjustable? To be lucid in a dream is to know you're dreaming. You look around at the oddness, the melting clocks, the levitating spoons, your third-grade teacher speaking fluent Whale, and something clicks. Ah, none of this is real. I'm dreaming. And then the dream changes, sometimes subtly, sometimes spectacularly. Lucidity brings agency. Not total control, but enough awareness to bend the rules. Now ask yourself, have you ever had a lucid moment in waking life? Not just mindfulness, not the whole be present, breathe, feel your feet thing, but a sudden, crisp realization that reality is something you're participating in, that your reactions, your assumptions, your beliefs, they're not inevitable. They're just habits you forgot were optional. It doesn't happen often, but when it does, it can feel like everything sharpens. You're no longer on autopilot. You see the choreography in social situations. You notice the narrative you're spinning about your day. You even catch your own thoughts mid-sentence and ask, wait, is that really mine? That's lucidity too. And like in dreams, it doesn't last forever. The world pulls you back. Routine resumes. The clock ticks. The coffee cools. But for a moment, you weren't just inside the story. You were watching yourself write it. Lucidity in waking life doesn't mean doubting reality. It means doubting the filter, the assumptions, the default settings. It's the mental equivalent of asking, who's steering this thing, and do I agree with where it's going? The philosopher Alan Watts once suggested that waking up isn't about finding a new truth. It's about recognizing that the dance is the point. You don't escape the illusion. You just stop mistaking it for a trap. Lucidity is not a permanent state. It's a blink, a shimmer, a pause in the hypnosis of familiarity. But even a single moment of clarity can change the shape of a day or a life. And maybe, just maybe, it's the only kind of waking that matters. It's an oddly unsettling thought, isn't it? The idea that all of this, your thoughts, your room, this video, the weight of your body, the faint hum of the world, could be part of a dream. We entertain the question playfully, but the moment it lingers, discomfort sets in. Not panic, not paranoia, just that quiet, shivering uncertainty at the edges of thought. Like when you realize the background music has been looping for hours and you never noticed. So why does that bother us? If dreams are beautiful, creative, sometimes profound, why the creeping unease? Part of it comes down to trust. We want the world to be reliable, solid, consistent. We want the light switch to work, the floor to hold, the laws of physics to not be open to interpretation. Dreams don't offer that. They glide from one reality to another without warning. People switch identities mid-conversation. Gravity becomes optional. Clocks melt. And worst of all, it all makes perfect sense until it doesn't. That's what rattles us. The idea that we might be misreading the room, not just socially, but existentially. There's a term in psychology, derealization. It's a sense that the world feels off. Not wrong, just dreamlike, hollow, or staged. It's not a delusion. It's an experience, one that many people have, especially under stress, fatigue, or after philosophical deep dives just like this one. And while it sounds frightening, it's often not. It's just weird. But maybe that weirdness is a reminder that our sense of realness is a construct built from pattern, repetition, and confirmation, not from any unshakable truth. So when we fear we're dreaming, we're not fearing nonsense. We're fearing impermanence, the possibility that the walls we lean on are just paper screens. Convincing, yes, but maybe just one scene away from dissolving. Still, even if this were a dream, it's one with depth, with rules, with you in it, and that makes it meaningful, whether it's scripted or not. So if a little doubt creeps in, let it. It means you're paying attention. Waking up is something you do every day, but have you ever really noticed it? Not just the groggy shuffle to the bathroom or the reflex to check your phone before your eyes have fully adjusted, but the moment, that odd flickering point when the dream world fades and the real one resumes its post, like an understudy sliding silently into place. It happens without applause, without proof, just a shift, a click, a decision to be awake again. But here's a strange thought. What if waking up isn't about truth? What if it's about coherence? Dreams are often incoherent. They lack narrative consistency, physical rules, stable identities. So when we wake up into a world that feels coherent, cause and effect, gravity, repetition, we accept it as reality, not because we've verified it, but because it hangs together better. We trust the story that makes the most sense, not necessarily the one that's most real. Even your body plays along. Your senses boot up. Your memory reattaches. Your name becomes your name again. It's a performance that begins anew each morning, as if your identity was just waiting in the wings. That too is a ritual. And like all rituals, it conceals as much as it reveals. Consider how dreams dissolve when you try to examine them. You chase details, but they slip away. You try to recall the logic, but it fades. Now ask, how often does waking life feel the same? How often do you forget what you just did, or why you entered a room, or how you got from one moment to the next? It's not evidence that you're dreaming, but it is evidence that the boundary between states of consciousness is porous. Waking up might not be a switch, it might be a choice, a gentle reaffirmation that this is the version of the world you're choosing to navigate right now. And tomorrow morning, you'll do it all over again, without questioning it. Unless, of course, you do. Let's entertain the idea, not as panic, but as a pause. Let's say, just for a moment, that all of this is a dream. The walls, the ceiling, the voice in your ears, the weight of your limbs, the quiet thoughts curling around your attention like steam. What then? Would anything actually change? Would kindness mean less? Would beauty matter less? Would your thoughts, the ones you're having right now, be any less yours? It's tempting to think of dreams as illusions, flimsy, unreal, disposable. But that's only because they tend to end. They don't persist. They vanish. And in their absence, we call them false. But right now, this one hasn't ended yet. You're still here, still breathing, still wondering. And that gives this moment, whether dream or waking, a kind of sacred weight. In some Buddhist philosophies, the world itself is described as Maya. Illusion, yes, but not in the dismissive sense. It's illusion as a lens, a shimmering veil that both reveals and conceals truth. To live inside illusion is not to be lost. It's to be aware that form isn't final. In Western thought, too, you'll find echoes. Descartes famously wondered whether an evil demon could be deceiving him. But even he couldn't deny the core truth of his experience. I think, therefore I am. So even if this is a dream, it's your dream. Your patterns, your fears, your curiosity, your mind making sense of the mist. You don't need to break the illusion. You don't need to wake up gasping. You just need to notice, to pay attention, to honor the strange flickering dance of being. Because in the end, the difference between dream and reality might not matter as much as how present you are in either one. So stay curious, stay gentle, and maybe, just maybe, let yourself wonder a little longer before the next scene fades in.